So, one of the special things that we look forward to around Christmas time at our house is gathering around our Christmas tree downstairs. So, this is our Christmas tree, and then behind that you see Lael's Christmas village that she hand painted, and it's a really special time when we get all that stuff out at Christmas time. And what the gifts that we've found for each other in the days leading up to Christmas. And some of those gifts are gifts that we need. Some of those are gifts that we want. And some of them are really thoughtful gifts, but they're all very meaningful gifts as we share them with each other. And in the gospel today, we see some pretty prophetic gifts being presented to Christ by the Magi. So we read here in Matthew 2, verse 11, "And on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They prostrated themselves and did him homage. Then they opened their treasures and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh." And as I thought about the propheticness of these gifts, I kind of wondered, did anybody get any prophetic gifts this year? Some really just important spiritual gifts. And for me, one of those gifts that hit me in a very deep spiritual way was just the gift of fatherhood. Being a dad. Having my family all home and around the Christmas tree. Everyone healthy and in that space. And I just had a profound appreciation for that. Because I know this is something that is to be cherished, this time when the family can all be there around the tree. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking, fatherhood is kind of a gift that comes with things. There's an important function involved in this gift. Being a dad is really important. And being a father for kids in our home, trying our best to set an example and to live for the Lord and have a relationship with Christ that they can see, and all this stuff is just so important. We can't underestimate it. It's an important function. But there's also a second thing I see in it, a need for prayer. There's a definite need for prayer if you're going to be a father, because there's so much that you want God's help with as you're trying your best to be a dad and raise your kids. And then third, there's a ministry involved, because it is a ministry being a father. It's one like your first and foremost ministry is that of the ministry in your house. And this actually kind of helped me understand something more about the gifts that the Magi brought to Christ, because in those three gifts we see an important function, something pointing to the need for prayer and worship, and then a ministry. We see those three things. And so in our Old Testament reading from Isaiah 60, verse 6, we read this: "Caravans of camels shall cover you, dromedaries of Midian and Ephah. All from Sheba shall come, bearing gold and frankincense and heralding the praises of the Lord." And this is an Old Testament prophecy of what it's going to happen as the Messiah comes. These caravans, these people bringing gold and frankincense. And we see that these are, in a very literal sense, some very unique material gifts that are being brought to Christ, gold and frankincense. Both have very practical uses. So with the gold, the Holy Family would be able to purchase the things they needed for their sojourn in Egypt, the place they were going to go. As I visualized what they might spend the gold on, I saw Joseph maybe buying the carpentry tools he needs for his shop as he sets that shop up in Egypt. All the things he would need to get that going. Because remember, he just left from the manger and went into Egypt. And I thought about Mary using that gold to buy the wool, the fabric, the spindles and things she would need to make clothes for the Holy Family. The food that they would need to procure. Basically, it costs a lot of money when you move to a new place to get established, right? I mean, I learned this when I came out here. It's a lot getting established in a new place. And I thought, man, that's a very, material, very practical thing. What about the frankincense? Well, frankincense would go a very long way in the nation of Egypt to provide them with a means to create a sacred space in their home for worship and prayer to their God, Yahweh. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But these gifts are not just materially significant, they're also spiritually significant. So I was reading an article titled "Why Gold, Frankincense, and Myrrh" by author Tom Nash from Catholic Answers. And Nash cites one of the early church fathers. He writes this: Saint Irenaeus says that the gifts signify the mystery of the incarnate Word, God who has become man. Gold, a symbol of royalty, represents his kingship. Frankincense, used in worship, points to his divinity, and myrrh represents his humanity, particularly in his passion and death. So let's break that down for a minute, and I want to kind of look at these things because these prophetic gifts point to the three things I mentioned earlier: an important function, a need for prayer, and a ministry. How so? Well, gold, being the symbol of royalty, pointed to the important function of Christ being the King of Kings, being the Messiah for the people of Israel. That was a very important function that Christ was going to serve. What about the frankincense? This is a very priestly thing, pointing to Christ's priesthood and the need for prayer. Because frankincense, if you recall, in the book of Exodus, chapter 30, verses 34 through 38, if you want to write that down, all right, frankincense was the spice and the incense used by Moses when he would go into the tabernacle and commune with God with the Ark of the Covenant. And so as Moses would go in to communicate with God, he would light the frankincense. And then he would begin his communication with God. And who do we communicate to God through? Isn't it our Lord Jesus Christ? Isn't he our great intercessor? And so, the frankincense also, for the Holy Family, as I mentioned, would be the thing about, in their day, that they would associate with that time of worship. So as Mary and Joseph would light the frankincense, they would be reminiscing of the times Moses communed with God. And then there they have Christ to commune with themselves, right? Well, what about the myrrh? How does that point to Christ's ministry? Well, interestingly enough, in those days, that was the spice that was used to embalm bodies. And so the myrrh points towards Christ's passion and that he would be giving his life for the great work for us, to make a way for us, to have that relationship with God through his own personal self-sacrifice. And so we have the myrrh, another very significant spiritual symbol. But what I really loved as I was kind of reading these articles was one that talked about Pope Gregory the Great. In his homilies on the Gospels, number 10, it says this: the three items represent gifts that we are to present to God in our daily lives. Gold is Christ's wisdom, which is to shine in our lives. Frankincense is the prayer and adoration we are to give him. And myrrh is our daily sacrifices to the Lord. And I thought, wow. Thinking about this made me realize that being a dad, being a father, I really get to reflect God's light to my family. I get to live into that important function with all my flaws and imperfections, doing the best I can to be that person that helps create the solid foundation in which my family is going to grow up. And that brings a serious need for prayer. Because I need all the help from God I can get in creating that solid foundation. You know, being a father and being a dad, I've learned to sacrifice in ways that I don't think I ever would have in other areas. You know, being single, I could just, if there was a day where I just wanted to go do something, I could go do it. I didn't have to worry about all this stuff, you know. But being a dad, knowing that There's people that depend on me for their security, for their food, for the roof over their head, for that solid foundation. It's taught me through the years quite a bit, and I'm thankful. And I have seen how my prayers have really shifted a lot. So where I used to pray that my kids would just really grow up and I would be a good dad, now as they're about to leave the home, my prayers are more like, I just pray they make good choices when they go out on their own. Lord, help them as they go into the world, make those good choices. Help them continue in their relationship, whatever that looks like with you, Lord. Help them to know that you're with them and present with them. And so my prayers shift a little bit, but there's still a need for prayer. And then, of course, as a father, there's such a ministry. And that ministry never goes away. Doesn't matter how old your kids are. The ministry of being a dad, it never goes away. And so as I was thinking about that, I come to the question, how is God calling you to an important function in this upcoming year? How do you sense God at work calling you to an important function? How do you sense God calling you in your prayer life? What is it that is in your life now that you need to be prayerful about? And third, what new ministries is God laying on your heart in the upcoming year? As you contemplate this, I pray that God gives you, pardon the pun, an epiphany.